Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm Count Christo and this is the very latest about Grey Eminence, the upcoming next level grand strategy game. It is my pleasure to present to you Dev Diary 2 Population. The link is in the description if you want to read through it for yourself. I have already read through it. I'm not going to do a kind of react thing here. I'm just going to go through and pick out a few bits that I think are worth talking about. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So, population. Obviously, a huge part of any game that's remotely concerned with attempting to simulate the world. And they're talking about the ways in which the population is broken down. This is known mostly so far already, but just for those of you who are behind the curve, the population is broken down into segments based on age, social class, culture, religion, and gender, in this order. And they talk about the fact that the order is important because we have a specific number of each possible combination of these parameters. Each tile in the database that contains the full information for its population. Where the hell is that noise? Sorry, it sounded like someone was trying to break through my window. So here we can see a more comprehensive breakdown of the population screen, and we can see some of these tooltips. We can also see one crucial thing, which I think, honestly, no offense to people that wrote the dev diary, because I'm sure this isn't what I was meant to take from it, but the most exciting thing here is that this screenshot includes nested tooltips. You can see the commoner cultural breakdown one has a padlock in the top, and you can see that the text highlighted blue looks like that's stuff you can hover over, and they're hovering over Mongol to get a second tooltip. There you go. Nested tooltips confirmed. We can also see what they mean here about the fact that we've got the broken down first into commoners, then broken down by culture, then broken down by religion. And if you looked at those religions, you'd see that they were broken down into a certain section, and so on and so on. It cascades. Hopefully we'll see the same kind of settings for nested tooltips that we got in CK3 in terms of being able to set the time delay for hovering over something before the tooltip locks and all that kind of good stuff. Or potentially it could, it could work in some other way, but looks like nested tooltips. I should mention, it's possible it's not a nested tooltip. It's possible you click on commoners and it pops out this window. It would be an odd place for it to pop out, just based on the framing of the shot. You'd think it would pop out right of the clicked item, but my theory is that it's nested tooltips, but we will see. If the devs contradict me in the comments, I will pin their comment. So, what else have we got in here worth looking at? Most of the things on here we've already seen. We know that there's various challenges to the administration, that you can do more things when you have more bureaucrats and stuff. But let's keep going on down here. So, demographic model. I'm going to actually skip ahead to here because I think this is a useful point to explain it from. These are all the different population groups, and they talk about the fact that they include an elderly one, even though things like pensions and retirement, formal retirement, were only a thing in the very late end of their game, but they do appear to be concerned in modeling all the way along, which is obviously awesome. So they have included elderly, but as we note, nomads and slaves, they don't get to retire. So only the commoners and peasants. And these are confirmed now as the only 4 population categories. The names are not necessarily final. They're especially not totally happy with commoners, but because commoners, it means kind of citizens, but the concept of citizenship is kind of something that didn't really exist at various points of the time frame in certain places. So commoners includes nobility. It can go all the way up, and peasants can range from kind of serfs who are practically slaves all the way up to kind of freeholders with their own property and things like that. So we can see, I'm not going to belabor the point on this chart, you can see that children grow up, people can transition between different social classes, top 3 can retire, disease and famine deaths occur to children and everybody else and elderly, and then only the elderly and nomads and slaves suffer old age deaths. There is also infant mortality, so I imagine there'll be lots of text around being able to get your population to explode once you can crank down the infant mortality. So now that we've got a little bit of an overview, let's take a step back and look at the demographic model section. So obviously it's all based on children, and children are not subdivided into religion, social class, and all that good stuff. And when they grow up, they're proportionally assigned to the adult segments. So it doesn't really matter what social class, religion, etc. children are. So this is just an easier way of displaying it, I guess, basically. And then the proportion to which children grow up can be skewed by cultural discrimination and religious intolerance, which is cool. So you can compel children to be raised by their parents, or I guess potentially by the state and things like that, in different ways. So, for example, the Janissaries in the Ottoman Empire, the classic example of this, children taken from their families, raised in an Ottoman style in order to integrate new territories and provide a military force for the Sultan. So that's obviously a very extreme example. You can also just apply religious intolerance on a level where people decide that maybe their kids should grow up in a way that's not going to be so inconvenient for them, basically. Obviously, this will be limited by your bureaucratic capability. So every month they grow up. Cool. We know they're broken down into social, class, religion, and gender, into culture. And as it says, 1356, world sucks. We like to complain about Year of Our Lord 2022 sometimes, but it's a heck of a lot better than 1356. And serfdom, slavery, all that good stuff. And there's this concept of, as the centuries rolling by, sometimes we can trend towards emancipation. And the idea of this emerging emancipation, increasing wealth of the lower classes and things is going to be really, really good. And then, yes, if we get citizenship, social class ceases to be a legal meaning, which is going to be very, very cool. I wonder how they model that, whether the differences between social classes disappear or whether everyone simply becomes a commoner. We'll have to wait and see. So, it says, interestingly, adults almost always profess a certain religion, which I assume means that atheism is in the game. What they define as religions will be interesting to me. Obviously, for the sake of gameplay, it would make sense to define some atheistic ideologies and schools of thought as religions, because it just kind of makes sense. But I'm curious to see what they're going to have as the not people professing a religion, which is going to be interesting. And yes, you can renounce their faith, government mandated or not. You can learn new languages, and adopting foreign customs is something very few can achieve, which makes sense. It's very difficult to fully switch over to a new custom. And yes, only women can bear children. So they've subdivided it, and basically the only thing that we know now is that only women can bear children. What we don't know yet is to what extent women participate in the workforce and to what extent we can have an influence over that. I highly suspect that's something we're going to be able to change. It's going to be something we're going to be able to intervene in the game. Obviously, the idea that women didn't work and men worked throughout history is purely fictional. On a subsistence farm in most places, women worked alongside men doing fairly similar jobs. But obviously there were periods where that was definitely not the case. So being able to simulate those periods where women weren't doing any of the work, but the men were, and then too many men go off to war, or too many men die, and women need to enter the factories, all that kind of stuff. If they can simulate that, that's going to be really cool, and I'm excited about that. And yes, pensions are a feature of this game, which will be interesting. Policies like pensions, by the way, so we can have many pensions. I wonder what the consequences are of not doing pensions. I have to imagine only, the elderly will suffer, but like, if you're the government, who cares? I guess there'll be unrest or something associated potentially with, the policies of your government not matching the growing liberalism of your citizenry, that kind of thing. So how can you interact with the population? This is a cool thing. They list a couple of examples, and obviously it's, as we've heard previously in the way that they're trying to design this game, it is top-down strategic stuff. It's not like click this button to spend some mana to convert this tribal into a citizen. Looking at you, Imperator Rome 1.0. So various policies funding the emancipation of serfs or the amalgamation of cities to forced resettlement and mass expulsion. So you can make sweeping changes to an area, or you can kind of gently encourage towards emancipation, and it'll be interesting to see. It's also worth noting that the effectiveness of such efforts depend on your country's bureaucratic or military capabilities. So I imagine, pogrom-style mass expulsions are going to require a certain degree of military intervention to make them happen, which is something I'm very excited about, because in lots of, even in things like mayo and taxes, implementing big religious policies and things like that, that's always relied on military monarch points and things like that. I'm really excited how they're going to do it in a game without mana. It makes a lot of sense that your ability to expel or displace or resettle people is based on the actual size of your army and the actual ability to wield your army and your bureaucracy, as opposed to, magic points, basically. So that's really cool. And the idea that the ability of the state to influence people and culture and religion scales up as the state becomes more powerful and centralized, which is something that's to a certain degree missing in something like Mayo and taxes. That's really, really cool. So, population modding. I'm not going to go too into this because I know very little about modding. I mean, I've made a couple of submods and things, but I know very little about modding. But it's just worth taking a look at this. Just to take a look at this is from 1.4 million people, and this is just a breakdown of all of the different social classes they're broken into. And it's absolutely insane if I can take it back to the top here. I mean, look at this nonsense. And I think actually, hang on, this is just the commoners, right? Broken down here. Obviously, this is like a truly horrendous way to visualize this data. I'm sure this isn't the only way. We've seen the pie charts and things like that. This is only if you want to really drill down into it. But still, it's interesting to see just the scale of data. That's the idea of this is just to show the scale of data. This is not the main way you interact with it. This is actually the tile editor that you can use if you're wanting to mod the game. So I'm not going to go too much into the modding because, as I say, I don't know too much about it, but it's a good dev diary. So this is obviously one of the cool things I'm very excited about. Breakdown potentially, almost certainly I would say, nested tooltips. If they don't have nested tooltips, I'm definitely going to suggest it because they're very, very useful. And just so we can get the full look here at the demographic picture, which is very, very nice. There are links in the description and comments of this video to the Discord, where the devs are telling us all kinds of cool stuff, especially if, and this is also linked, you are a patron. There's all kinds of extra information being revealed to patrons, and there is a document linked in the description of the stuff they revealed to the public. If you join the Discord and having become a patron and join the patron channel, there's a link to another document I'm maintaining of all the extra information they revealed if you are a patron. There is also a link to the Reddit, where all of the dev diaries and things get posted. There's a link to their other socials, as well as, of course, as I mentioned, their Patreon. If you want to see this project succeed, the best way you can help it to do that is to support it on Patreon. I have been Count Christo, and I will see you in a week, 2 weeks, 10 years, who knows? Hopefully not 10 years. But we don't know the current release date of the next dev diary, but I can only assume it's coming up in the next couple of weeks based on the cadence so far. And once it does come out, I will see you then. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.